Morning, everyone. Sorry about our late start there. Just going to wait for a few more numbers to come in. I think we'll get started in 20 seconds. Perfect. So I'm going to get started just so we don't waste any more time. But first of all, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to hear more about supporting young carers into employment. I have the pleasure of hosting today's session and bringing together some amazing speakers. And it's even more pertinent as today is actually Young Carers Action Day. So really not a better day of the year to do it. My name is Lauren Roberts. I'm the advocacy lead for the City and Guilds Foundation, where we're all about removing the barriers that individuals may face when looking for work and entering employment or accessing training. Earlier in the year, City and Guilds launched a report called Youth Misspent, and that was all about highlighting the challenges that young people face when entering today's job market, and even before they do so, some of the misconceptions they have around work and what it means to start work. Through this report, we uncovered several different themes and trends, and one of them that stuck out to us was the rise in the number of young people taking on the role of caring, and the impact this can have on them and their search for work and training. One of the contributors to the report was the Carers Trust, so we're delighted today to bring you this session in collaboration with them, and we'll hear more from the Carers Trust really shortly. Just a tiny bit of housekeeping from me. We'll be hearing from several speakers and a whole panel during today's session, and we've got some time at the end for questions, so please do pop them as we go just in the Q&A, and we'll get those collated and make sure we can fit as many in as we can. We've also created a digital credential for anyone that attends and would like to pledge to supporting this movement, and I'm going to be sharing details at the end of the webinar to that, and you'll also receive a link of how you can claim your badge and share that on social media with your contacts in your follow-up event email, so please do look out for that from us. Just to kick us off, I'm going to test your knowledge and see what the room thinks of this first statistic. So the first thing we're going to do is run a quick poll, and that is, so what percentage of young people who took part in our Youth Misspent report disclosed they were or had been a young carer? So we've got 4%, 12% or 19%. Still starting to trickling up, but cool. Right, okay, so the correct answer was 19%, which is great, and we've got the vast majority of people getting that right, so that is great. We've got some well-informed people in the room. This initially came as quite a shock to us. Once we delved into the reasons and the barriers, it became super clear. We've also got some other stats that the report uncovered, which also came as a little bit of a shock to us in terms of not only the role that young carers take on, but the barriers and challenges that this can pose to them when they're looking for work, and some of the hidden barriers this can also pose for people that are looking after family members or relatives, and the toll that can take on them, not only in their education while they're going through school, college, university, whatever it might be, but also once they're actually in work, and what more employers could do to actually support them. So as I say, this came as a little bit of a shock to us, but it's a great segue for someone that it didn't come as much of a shock to. So I'm going to introduce you to my co-host, Kirsty McHugh, the CEO of the Carers Trust, who's going to talk a little bit about the work of the Carers Trust. They also recently released a report, Being a Young Carer is Not a Choice, it's just what we do. And one of the things that stuck out to us was some of the real parallels that were from both of the reports. So Youth Misspent and the Carers Trust report highlighted some of the following barriers and some of the following statistics. So I'm going to hand over to Kirsty to delve into these a little bit deeper and to talk about the panel that we have and we're going to be hearing from.
Thank you very much indeed, Lauren, and I am delighted to be here. Thank you very much, everybody, and welcome to Young Carers Action Day. Just want to make sure that you are all aware, who a young carer is. You're going to be meeting a few, but we're talking about young people under the age of 25 who are carrying out a caring role for a family member or potentially a friend. And as you'll see from the stats there, the implications for young people with these roles are really very profound. We're not entirely certain how many we have around the country, but it could be as many as 1 million. and the implications in terms of education, employment, life chances, and just a life alongside caring. Really is underexplored. And so us at Carers Trust, that's one of our missions. So Carers Trust, we're a UK-wide charity. We work with a network of local carer organisations, about 130 across the UK, and then an even wider network of young carer organisations. And we collectively support at least 1 million unpaid carers. So it's a scale operation, budget day to day, nursery care, etc., is in the headlines, but the impact on family carers otherwise sadly isn't. So my job is, and I'm going to keep to the script, is to introduce our panelists, and these really are the people with the expert knowledge and those you want to hear from. And we're going to be hearing from 2 employers who've been doing fantastic work in the sphere of helping young people enter into employment. So first of all, we're going to be hearing from Antonia from the Body Shop, and then Lisa from the Civil Service Commission. I'm then going to be passing over to the stars of the show, our 3 young adult carers, Catherine, Alicia, and Vishali. Vishali, if I've pronounced your name wrong, it could be Vishali, tell me off, okay? So I'll make sure I get that right. So I'm going to start with the employers first, and I'm looking at you, Antonia. Body Shop, obviously a very well-known brand, known to very many of us, etc. Bought our stuff there for many decades now. But just wanted to get from you, where did the interest and the motivation to support young carers come from? So just give me a little bit of background about the organisation and the work it does in this field, please.
Thank you, Kirsty, and thank you so much for having me here today. So you saw the job title earlier on in my role. So I'm the Inclusive Hiring Lead at the Body Shop. And at the moment, that means that I'm leading the Open Hiring Programme, which was introduced to the UK in 2021. And with that programme, we were looking at how we hire, and we wanted to break down the barriers to employment that kind of exist within or come up within the recruitment process. And we particularly wanted to support people who have historically been marginalised and who has had barriers to employment. And as it was 2021, so after the COVID kind of period, we saw that prior to COVID, young people were experiencing high levels of unemployment. But even after, again, young carers were experiencing really high levels of unemployment. So we partnered with the Carers Trust to ensure that the opportunities that were coming through our Open Hiring Programme were available to young carers. And the way that we kind of allowed that availability to be there is by posting our vacancies, and with the vacancies, when we recruit, we weren't going through extensive interviews, we weren't doing shop floor trials or anything like that. We were just asking 3 questions, and ultimately the first person to apply was the first person to get offered the opportunity. And through our partnership, we were able to share the words about the opportunities with young carers. And when the vacancies were posted, we allowed them to have an exclusive 7-day period to apply for the job before it was then advertised on external job boards. So we had the partnership, made sure that the young carers were getting access to our opportunities, just because we know that sometimes the biggest barrier is just not being given an opportunity to do the work or to get the training and to be able to show their skills. And yeah, we were able to hire quite a few young carers into our stores. We were also able to educate the business about young carers and their needs and how to support them. And in fact, when we started Open Hiring in 2021, the charity partner for our for the UK, so the charity that we were raising money for during the Christmas period was actually a young carers charity. So it's something that we at the Body Shop are really passionate about and we're really aligned with, and we continue to partner with Carers Trust and support the carers through employment and also through Pamper Days.
That's fantastic, really inspiring to hear about the work that's going on there. I'm going to turn to you, Lisa. So same question, where did the motivation come from in relation to potentially, or particularly sort of looking at young carers for employment opportunities?
Thanks, Kirsty. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa. So I think the motivation, there's two parts to it. I think one was the motivation for doing something different in the first place. And I think Antonia's kind of covered a lot of the very, very similar things and thinking that we had. But the key thing that you mentioned earlier was life chances. And I think we'd already been working. So our programme is essentially a kind of a small arm of recruitment in the civil service that does things a little bit differently. So generally, we've got to follow very, very strict rules around how we advertise, where we advertise, who we advertise to, which in a basic term is that it's open and fair. So it's open to everyone to apply. We can only make exceptions to that where we've got justified reasons. So when we started the project about 5 years or so ago now, that started working with people who were leaving prison because there were some very obvious barriers to employment for them around criminal convictions. Now, as our thinking's moved along, we've realised that for many of the groups that we work with, there's very, very common barriers, and it's not about being, sort of from the same background. It's just the experiences that you have when you're trying to get into employment. So, some of those things around confidence, and again, Antonia's mentioned some of them, but all of those people have their life chances affected by things that have gone on in the past, whether it's, one experience or another. They are being sort of ultimately impacted. So basically the thinking's grown from doing that, starting there, to when we started to understand what some of those barriers are, being a young carer, needing to take time out of potentially out of education, out of employment, then having to face the workplace and think, where do I even start? It's a scary place to be. If you haven't had those challenges, it's even scarier if you're thinking, I don't have the experience on my CV, or I've not got the confidence or the skills. So I think we picked up on the fact that there was very, very, sort of similar barriers there. And a colleague of mine, and I can't take the credit for this, started working with Carers Trust. But similar to Antonia, we've already experienced this really great ability then to essentially ring fence our roles, come to the Carers Trust and put them out to the hubs and the networks, and allow young carers to access them only, and not have all of that competition that you might face in a kind of standard advert.
That's fantastic. Now, I wonder whether you could tell us a bit about whether you had any internal challenges around getting the programme up and running. Was there sort of, did you have to do any sort of internal education about what young carers are and the barriers that might face?
Yes, absolutely. I think we're still on that. I think we'll always be in education. It's just I think there's a thing with engagement and education sometimes that you do it once and everyone understands it, and then you can go away and think, oh great, we've nailed that. But it's such a big organisation. The challenge with the civil service is it's lots of different places in lots of different locations. What I do think we've got a brilliant carers network in the civil service who are made up of people from different departments who get together and say, what are the issues that carers face? And that's young adult carers, that's carers of all ages. And they're very, very proactive, so they help do the education for us. But I think the challenge we have a lot of the time is helping vacancy holders to understand why we need to do something different. Why can it not just be the same way? Because some people will say, well, why can't you just apply through civil service jobs? What's the difficulty type thing? And it's helping them to understand that those things do have an impact on you as you start to go into the sort of the workplace. So I think it's an ongoing challenge, Kirsty, but in a positive sense. It's very rewarding helping people to sort of see what those can be.
I want to hand over to hear from our young carers themselves now. Going to turn to you first, Catherine. Would you mind just telling us a bit about your background, your caring role, and your experiences in relation to employment, please?
Hi, I'm Catherine. I became a carer at the age of 10 for my mother, who had a nervous meltdown. And over the course of the last 15 years, I've, cared for various family members for various reasons. I often describe us a little bit like a Jenga block, where hopefully when one wobble happens, the rest of us are stable enough. I've never had a full-time job, but that's partly because I'm still in education. I'm hopefully finishing my PhD this year, and I've had to sacrifice a lot to be able to focus on my education, and I'm also aware that I'm in a very privileged position to be able to be doing a PhD as an unpaid carer. However, I have had lots of jobs because part of my caring responsibilities is helping out financially. So I actually had 6 jobs to get me through my master's degree, for example. So that means I've had a lot of experience with good employers and bad employers. At one point, when I explained that I had to have my phone on in case my mother needed me, I was essentially told, well, no, I was literally told, well, I'll give you the noose and it's your choice to hang yourself, on whether or not I would be on my phone for inappropriate reasons. So yeah, and then I've also had really good experiences, such as doing the internship with Carers Trust, where they were incredibly, practicing what they preach and very understanding and welcoming. So I've got a range of experience from a range of areas as being an unpaid work carer that's also working, but also trying to juggle my education at the same time.
My goodness. Yeah, so for the majority of us, juggling a PhD with work would be quite something, but to actually do that with what sounds like quite sort of full-on caring role as well is quite something. So Catherine, tell us what the PhD is in. I'm curious.
I'm looking into autism in the Stone Age, essentially.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I'm an archaeologist, so I'm looking at the ways in which different neurotypes work together and would have been part of our cultural evolution. So really putting the emphasis on the importance of having different mindsets and things, which again also plays into my carer role. My mother's meltdown was due to an undiagnosed ADHD and autism diagnosis. My whole family now have diagnoses, including myself. So yeah, being able to care for someone with autism, but also cope with myself and things like that, have all led to this PhD, to acknowledge that modern society is not working. How did it work in the past, essentially?
Indeed. Well, whoever employs you post PhD, Catherine, are going to be lucky to get you. That's very very clear. Alicia, and can you just say a bit about your background, caring role and experiences of education and employment?
Yes, so my name's Alicia, I'm 20. I currently work in education with kids on the spectrum, mainly because every day is different. I've had previous experience working in the outdoor education industry and working in that sort of thing. However, I was incredibly lucky enough to meet Antonio at the end of 2021, I'm going to say it was at this point, as I was quite lucky enough to get a Christmas job over at the Body Shop. Kind of for me, I've had similar experiences to Catherine in terms of a lot of employers don't really understand the need for flexibility when in work. Like as well, I was a carer for someone who had mental illness, and it's such a changing environment that things can change within minutes. And if you're working somewhere where they're not just going to let you go if that phone rings, it becomes a whole nightmare of, well, actually don't bother coming back again kind of thing, which is something I know Catherine's experienced and I've experienced as well. And I think it's something that could definitely be improved on, like the need for flexibility in any industry, no matter what. Unlike Catherine, I decided to not go to university as I was very much not an academic person. But something I've really found is, despite the fact that my caring role has a lot of transferable skills, I don't get even asked to interview because I haven't got a degree on the application. And I think it's a huge issue that so many other young carers who decide not to go to university face.
We've decided at Carers Trust to take off all requirements in relation to degrees. And I've done that with previous charities as well, because that's clearly the right thing to do. And Alicia, just sticking with you, has it been, aside from Body Shop, just thinking about other roles, have you found it really difficult to talk about your caring role at work? Or
yeah, I mean, the job that I work now in education is the first one where, like, in the interview, when like the employer was asking, like, tell me about yourself, it was like the first time I actually spoke about it. Before, like, I just didn't want to talk about it because I didn't want them to think, oh, there's a reason to not hire her. Because, as soon as you say that you are a carer or you have responsibilities for someone with mental illness, there's a lot of stigma around it, and a lot of the times, especially to stereotype, when you're being interviewed by a man, they'll just look at you and be like, I've got someone else who can take the job. And I think it's not something people want to talk about, but I am slowly getting used to talk about it in the employability way. But I know there's a lot of other young people who just won't see it as a benefit. They'll see it as something that will hinder them.
Yeah. So stigma and fear, which may be well founded, but actually might not be. But if you're not having the conversation to begin with, you don't know. So our third young adult carer, Vishali, or is it Vishali? Tell me which, please.
No, you got it right the first time.
Yay!
It's Vishali. Hi, I'm Vishali. I'm a young adult carer for my elder brother. He's got Rodkin dystrophy, which is a rare visual impairment. They don't have a cure for it, so eventually he will become fully blind. So I've basically been born into the role of being a carer. It's all I've ever known. It's what's natural to me. But alongside being a carer, I'm also a full-time uni student. So I do business management and marketing at uni. I also work full-time at Heathrow, so I'm a security officer. So as you can tell, I'm like Catherine and Alicia, I'm trying to juggle a lot. I feel like with being a young carer, no matter what I do, whether it's working to get through uni or even being at uni, your main commitment is always being a young carer. And I feel like that's a struggle when trying to kind of find your foothold in life and trying to secure a career, because you'll always have to work around your life as a carer, and you'll always have to put that first. So that's one of the big struggles that I found trying to get into employment and being still employed. It's a struggle that I face daily.
Yeah. I hear that. I think I was wondering there about all the transferable skills you must have. And hearing from all three of you, and the constant juggling and sort of sporting in so many different ways. Could you just sort of tell us a bit about what sort of transferable skills?
Yeah,
Vishali,
of course.
you developed.
I feel like from a young age, I've learned a lot about empathy. So I feel like unlike others, if there's working in a team or if there's disputes within a workplace, I would be able to handle it a lot better than my colleagues, because I would be able to kind of put my emotions to a side, any opinions, if I do have any, take that out of the matter and kind of mellow out the situation, get everyone's point across, get a mutual understanding, kind of defer any arguments. I also feel like being a young carer, you have a lot of perseverance and you have a lot of resilience, because it's a hardship every day and you have to push yourself every day to be able to get through the day. And I feel like in a hard working environment, it almost pushes you because it's what you're used to. And I do feel like I've gained leadership skills through being a young carer. I feel like having to take on a role at such a young age, especially for an older sibling, someone that's older than you, that kind of, my brother himself has said like it hurts him to have to approach a younger sibling for help. So I feel like it makes me very confident in my position, where I can take the stand and I can show you that even though that I'm a younger individual, I will still be able to bring the same leadership skills as someone who's advanced.
Yeah, absolutely. So Catherine, just transferable skills, just sort of a couple of minutes in terms of, what do you think young carers particularly bring to the workforce, please?
I think, as has been touched on, organisation is a huge one. Being able to know how to prioritise tasks appropriately. I have been doing my family finances since the age of 11, when my grandfather sat me down and taught me about Excel to keep track of my mother's spending. So there's things like that are hard skills as well. And as Vishali said, I think empathy is a huge one, because that's a soft skill that's very easily overlooked in the work environment. But being able to know when you need to help someone and how as well. If someone goes nonverbal, for example, I'm very good at working out whether or not they need someone to make a decision for them, or whether or not they know what they want but need to work out how to communicate that. And that's a skill that's really important, especially in group environments, because sometimes, you know, we all think differently, we all have different phrases and words that we gravitate towards, and understanding if someone is trying to get something across but potentially using different words than you would use is a really important skill, especially when discussing group projects and things. So yeah, I personally think that even before I started actual work, I had a lot of skills that others potentially didn't, because, you know, not as many young people have to come home and work out, okay, well, if I put the washing on now, I can then start dinner. And if I'm chopping the vegetables whilst I'm letting this simmer or whatever, doesn't necessarily come as naturally, because, you know, when you've been doing it from so young an age, it's much easier to be able to apply that to a work environment.
And Alicia, same question to you, please, just about, you know, the transferable skills.
I've got a similar to Vishali and Catherine, so it's trying to find different things now. I think for me, it's like team management again, and kind of being able to work on your feet. Like for me, when my mum's had a meltdown in public and whatnot, I've got to think on my feet and be like, okay, how do we get ourselves out of the situation we're in, into an environment that's calm, without, as one would like to say, not making a huge issue out of it. And you can then obviously in the workplace, when there's issues, when there's disputes and stuff like that, it's how to work around things and how to really make sure that you're getting everyone's point of view across, but not in, like, you know, doing it in a way where you're not just shutting people out, which can happen a lot with people who haven't kind of got any experience in working with people with some sort of access need. Resilience, empathy, communication, the list just goes on and on and on, because there's just so many things that we do without even realizing that it's actually a skill.
Yeah, this is all really powerful. Yeah, you all sound the ideal employees from my perspective, a level of maturity, which I think we all want to see within our workforce. Going to turn back to our employers, if I may. So you've talked about the sort of the specific programs that you've had in place in terms of supporting young carers. Just wanted you to sort of reflect a bit on more mainstream recruitment, and whether you are have adjusted or working towards adjustments to accommodate carers more in the general recruitment pool. And then also wondered whether you could say something about the support and anything different you do to support our young carers once they're with you in the workforce. Antonia, can I still start with you?
Yeah, so I will say, I know Alicia mentioned that she joined us at the Body Shop, and even though the session that the job club we did with Carers Trust was for the seasonal opportunities, but Alicia actually got like traditional role. So she went through a traditional process and went for a team leader role. So we're actually able to see that through the partnerships that we had for our more entry-level roles, we were able to talk about the work that we're doing, talk about us being an inclusive employer, and that then allowed us to influence her decision to go for, you know, the role that was available at the time. But we're still working on the partnerships that we have with recruitment organizations, and we're trying to make sure that it's not just, you know, organizations that are doing executive searches and, like, you know, bringing senior clientele to the business, but really diversifying the organizations that we're partnering with as like a general rule. So just looking at inclusive hiring as a whole. So that's something that we're doing. And I think the partnerships are really strong ways of just getting the opportunities out there, but we're still on our journeys. There's still policy changes that we are making internally. But I think as we continue to support people from like more backgrounds, you know, such as young carers, young adult carers, just carrying on that education piece. I know Lisa mentioned it before, educating our like hiring managers to understand the needs of different people, the experiences that they've kind of gone through and how that impacts them in the workplace, and things to be mindful of to ensure that we're supporting them effectively. That's literally one of the like core things, and it allows like that education. If you don't have it, none of the programs will be able to stand. So really like just emphasizing more education, and that's not just us trying to do the education ourselves. We've had sessions where we've actually brought a young carer on to deliver presentations to hiring managers to actually tell them directly, these are the barriers that we kind of experience, these are the things to be mindful of, these are languages that you should probably try and avoid using in the workplace. So, you know, we know the best source of information are like individuals that kind of just are going through that themselves. So education, I think, is the key one, but partnerships as well plays a massive role.
So partnerships and education, language, interesting. And you're mainstreaming this by the sounds of things, so throughout the entirety of the recruitment process.
And we're still on a journey. There's so much more that we can do, but I think like I've been very much focused on the entry level, but whilst I'm perfecting that, I'm working with the different partners that are working on other parts of recruitment, and we just continue reviewing and improving and continue.
Just sticking with you, Antonia, just in terms of the any practical adjustments that you've made within the workforce, is it just more around enabling and supporting line managers to be flexible, or is there anything more formal you put in place?
I think at the moment it's been more on the enablement piece, and I think like there's some work that we're wanting to do to simplify the application processes, for example. In some cases, there are just loads of questions that are asked that we don't necessarily need to go into detail on, and it just ends up taking time away from people that have, like, you know, use for, or they're able to use their time for other things. So that's something that we're in the process of doing, but we've just got changes of HR systems that's stopping that change from being implemented. But looking at that, and we've also changed the way that we communicate our vacancies. So the job adverts, the language that we're using within that, we know that certain language can actually stop people from applying. So we, you know, talk about the fact that we're very like a flexible and open employer as well within our job adverts, to really encourage people from all backgrounds, you know, all responsibilities to apply to.
That sounds great. Let's turn to you, Lisa, Civil Service Commission. So you know, different sector, of course. Just wanted to ask you about, again, you've got your programme, you're partnering with us, which we're really pleased about. But what work has been going on in terms of influencing more mainstream recruitment avenues into the civil service? And again, are there any sort of, you know, is it just informal flexibility, or is there any more sort of formal approaches that you've been taking to support carers when in the workforce?
It's a good question, because I think the recruitment that goes on across the civil service that isn't the stuff that we're doing has to be by default kind of, as I said earlier, kind of fair and open. So there isn't necessarily any targeted changes that happen in there. But it's very much what Antonia was saying, that for me, every time we work with a vacancy holder or a line manager as part of our program, they don't forget that experience. So they take it out with them into, you know, recruitment that's in business as usual, as you would call it. And they also, I think, share it with the colleagues, because the amount of interest that we get that's come from word of mouth, you know, so and so's been talking to someone at the water cooler or on Teams now, as it would be, and said, oh, I took part in this recently, it was amazing, like we've got a really, really good you know, young carer on the team now, and it builds from there. So I think there's something about, we're not making any direct changes to what we do in kind of mainstream recruitment, but I think that the impact it has, just by lieu of the fact that they take part in our schemes, the only thing that I think because quite a lot of the time we're trying to run them twin track, because my ideal is that one day we'll work ourselves out of a job, because we won't need a kind of specialist unit to be doing this. It will just be part of normal recruitment. But at the moment, we've just got to get alongside them and say, you know, you could do it like this, what do you think? And the other big bit that I think Antonia's touched on is like outreach. I think there's just a big hurdle at the moment. There's something about the civil service having a very scary reputation sometimes to me, of like, oh, I couldn't do that, you know, you need to have a degree, or you need to have lots of experience, etc. You need to come from a certain background. Even I experienced that, and I've worked here now for 9 years. I'm from, sort of a small town, and it was very, very scary joining. So I think it's just trying to really diversify who we've got in, and then, like Antonia said, also take that back out to people. So the young carers that we get, and I know there was a fantastic story that Carers Trust put on for International Women's Day of Charlotte, telling her, experience of going to work in DWP, and those things are just so, so good. And then just quickly on the support, I think the civil service is already really good at flexibility. It's one of the cells that we've got, when we're sort of saying we might not pay as much maybe as the private sector, but we are very flexible in terms of, whether you're working from home, in the office, flexi time in terms of when you work your hours, flexi in terms of your working patterns, part-time working patterns, things like that. And we do offer some extra support for people to take or leave that join through our programme as well, which is about giving them a buddy, which is another civil servant who they can talk to in confidence outside of the line management chain, because no one wants to say to the line manager, sometimes it depends on your relationship, but sometimes you might not want to say, do you know what, I'm really struggling. I'm finding it hard to balance caring for someone against doing all of this stuff, and how do I do it? And that buddy is there to do that little bit of just extra. If you don't want to let on to your business, that what's going on, that they're just there to be an extra kind of listening ear. And that's something that's offered. It's not forced, it's something for them to take up. But it's just to help having someone there who knows the civil service and can give you a little bit of advice.
Some really sort of practical and helpful tips, I think, there, Lisa. Thank you. I'm going to ask all 5 of you a question about what changes you want to see. So the Chancellor is going to be at the dispatch box today, so delivering the budget. He wants a lot more people back into the workforce, whether they're younger or older. So labour market is sort of very much sort of front of mind, I think, so politically. And we have at least 5 million carers before we even take sort of Scottish statistics into play across the UK. Many of whom will be of working age. And so, just looking ahead, what sort of change would you like to see, either from employers or from government or sort of wider society? And I'm going to sort of turn to the employers first to give our young carers a little bit more time, if that's all right. Antonia or Lisa, who's got a sort of ready-made answer you want to jump in with? Lisa, I'm looking at you at the moment, so I think you may have the short straw there.
I'm going to try and answer quickly then. I think, she says, thinking on her feet very quickly, I think there's something about the way that caring is perceived at the moment by society, possibly government, just I don't know. I think I'm not zooming in on anyone in particular. I think it is society, that it's kind of almost just like, well, it's just something that you do. And I think that was the title of the report, wasn't it? There was something in there around it's kind of, it's an expectation, but it's a bit like, but you're just going to have to crack on because that's, that's just your type thing. And I think that there needs to be some type of recognition of this, because it would fall apart without the unpaid care that goes on across the country. And so I don't know how you would recognise that in terms of practical terms, or just across the country. But I think people really need to put themselves in the shoes of, it might be okay for you, you might not have had that expectation on you from X age, so it's not okay just to say, well, you're just going to have to deal with it, and I didn't get any special treatment type thing. There's just something about the way that we approach and recognise the care that goes on right across the country. I think it's probably that.
Yeah, so language recognition. I'm going to turn to Lisa, but I just want to say that after this question, I'm going to hand back to the wonderful Lauren. And those of you in the audience, do type in your questions as well. So, Lisa, what do you think in terms of change?
I think I'll go. So I really agreed with what Lisa had said. And one of the things that I recall from earlier partnerships with Carers Trust and just speaking with young carers was that even when they're claiming universal credit, for example, there's no specialist support that's given to people with caring responsibilities, young carers. You know, we know that there are disability experts and there are ex-offender experts within the different job centres, and I think that I would like to see there actually being like a young carers expert that's able to really help them navigate not just getting into the work environment, but also being able to like make time for themselves as well, and you know, work on their own well-being, as well as being able to support you know, the member in the family that they're caring for. So I think more recognition from, you know, government, and for it to then lead on to there being adequate specialist support for people from that have basically said, hey, you know, I want support from the government.
I completely agree. We have a pledge card, full series of pledges that we're asking MPs and peers to sign up to this afternoon, an event in the House of Lords, and we have an open letter to the Prime Minister that's being delivered to number 10 today as well. And the employment support bit, I think, is a really essential part of the picture, because there isn't the specialist support there that there is for other groups. Turning to our young carers, let's go with Vishali first. What change or changes would you like to see?
So I just want to follow on from what Lisa said. So I understand that a lot of businesses are quite flexible, but I feel like a lot more could be done for a young carer. So like Catherine and Alicia were saying, how they need to have their phones on, they need to be able to have that communication, and like, I don't know if you'd have to take emergency annual leave or however it would work for you to get out of work to help whoever you're caring for. And I feel like there should be something in place along those lines as well, because there's a thin line with attendance for work and annual leave, and it can quickly turn into sort of a problem at work where you're now getting in trouble because you've had to miss days off work and you've had to very short notice tell work that you can't make it and you have other commitments. Because at the end of the day, no matter what we do in life, whether it's being in uni or working full time, our main commitment would always have to be being a carer. So I just feel like flexibility and being able to accommodate to a carer.
Lovely, thank you. And then Catherine?
Yeah, so much that could change. First and foremost, I think that a bit like Carers Trust do, allowing carer days, I think that's relevant for not just unpaid carers, but parents, for example, when things happen. I also think that it would be lovely to see being an unpaid carer as a protected characteristic. This is only one small step, as I'm sure all of us know. Just because it's a protected characteristic doesn't mean we don't find ways to discriminate still, but it would be a step and it would raise awareness hugely. I also think that changing the overall employment system for reasonable adjustments to be far more normalized, because, for example, my mother could have gone back to work had she not been forced to fit into the boxes of this is the support that we offer. Most disabled people are capable of working, but the workforce simply isn't flexible enough, which means that plenty of very capable disabled people aren't in work, which only increases the amount of work that unpaid carers need to do. So instantly that would help everyone, in my opinion. Very few people enjoy sitting at home, and it would then mean that unpaid carers can spend the time that they need to or sort of have less time that they need to be at home. And it also means that disabled people who are unable to be in the workforce can get better quality of care, because, you know, it's all got a knock-on effect. But yeah, I think that certainly something that is doable, in my opinion, for most businesses is giving a separate sick leave to a carer leave a few days, because you shouldn't have to sacrifice your own well-being because you've had to take sick leave for someone else. So yeah,
I think it's a really important point. Actually, services for the cared for person comes up as so one of the number one requests, and if the cared for person is employed, that opens up an awful lot of doors, doesn't it, for young carers. So Alicia.
Like something that I know when I've had this discussion with a lot of kind of people in the past, it's that like young carers and young adult carers, they're not asking to skip the queue in any way, shape or form when it comes to employment. A lot of the times we're just asking for an alternative that might benefit us better, because a lot of us, like for me, like I missed out on a lot of my crucial education at GCSE because of everything that was going on at home, and like how personal independence tribunal paperwork became my GCSE revision, which obviously it shouldn't be the case. And I mean, just because someone has no formal qualification doesn't mean that they're not the perfect person for the role. Like we're saying so much nowadays that, you know, we want to hire blind, we want to hire in a way where it's just the best candidate, but we've got to remember that the best candidate might not always have that 2-1 degree, that first level degree, that 4 A stars at A level. That person might have just got 4 GCSEs, 2 in English and maths. But if you look at all the things that they do and all like the kind of all the caring role they've had, you know, that's much more important than 4 A stars. And I mean, all young carers and young adult carers are asking for is just a foot in the door, because once you've got that foot in, so many can show employers and show kind of line managers that all the transferable skills they've got make them the best candidate. But until someone gives them that opportunity, it's just physically impossible.
Just wanted to say to you personally, Alicia, that some of the most successful people I know did not go to university. There's definitely more than one way of sort of forging your place in the world. I think we've got pretty much a manifesto for young carers are there. So visibility, language, understanding of the carer role, employment pathways, you know, DWP support, Job Centre Plus, employer recruitment practices, and actually I throw in apprenticeships as well. That they're often not flexible enough to encompass young carers, and they should be. And then when people are in the workforce, it's around sort of driving that understanding and putting that support. I should mention that a carer leave bill is going through Parliament at the moment that we are actively supporting, but of course that will be about the implementation. That will mean that employers will need to give people time off for their caring role, but what we wouldn't want, of course, is that to be a straitjacket. What we want is flexibility. So I'm going to leave it there. Just going to mention the pledge before I go. So employers on the call, please do sign up to it. And I'm going to hand back to Lauren. I think I'm a minute late, Lauren, so apologies.
No worries. Thank you so much, Kirsty, and thank you so much to all of our speakers. I've just been sitting here just nodding with everything while my camera's been off. We've had some really great questions come for you guys, and I think one that's perfectly placed to the employers and one that's perfectly placed for young people, which is great. So just before we finish up and I talk about the pledge that Kirsty mentioned, I wondered if I could start with the first question just to our employers, which is a really great practical one on, we've spoken about, you know, inclusive recruitment and widening where we're actually going out to find talent pools. Rebecca has asked, where can employers actually find and advertise to these young carers? Are there any forums, any groups, any pages? How have you guys gone about finding these amazing young carers you've brought in, and how can other employers do so? We start with Antonia.
Yeah, I'll go first. So the partnership that we have with Carers Trust is a great way for us as a business to get our opportunities shared with young carers. They hold job clubs for employers and for positions when they come about, whether it be apprenticeships or like permanent or part-time positions. And yeah, we've got, I think Annette is on the call as well at the moment, and she's the program manager for the Young Carers Futures program or the employability program. So she's that focal point of contact, and she shares the vacancies from all the different employers that are part of that network to all the different carer centres that are part of that network. So I'd say, Rebecca, reach out to Annette, and then yeah, she'll be able to link you up and share the vacancies when they come up.
Thanks, Antonia. Anything to add, Lisa?
Yeah, only that exactly the same as Antonia said, that it's the partnership of Carers Trust who then put our vacancies out to the hubs. One thing that we found is that sometimes people need the support of someone that they trust to apply for stuff, and quite often the catalyst has been someone else saying you should go for this job, because you don't necessarily have the self-belief, but someone else has the self-belief that you can borrow for a bit. So I think the relationships that are built up in those hubs between people is the key for us. It's the kind of, it genuinely is the human factor. It's one thing seeing a job on a jobs board, it is something different, someone coming to you and saying, I've seen this job, I think you'd be really good for it. So I think that's a big factor in, you know, what we're doing.
Perfect, thank you. Thank you. So we've got another question directed towards our young carers. This one's really great and one that I'm super interested to hear about. I'm sure you all are. But just wanting to hear about you guys' kind of career goals and ambitions, and a few of you are studying. So yeah, just if we start with Vishali, career goals, ambitions, where do you see yourself? Go for
it. As a title, I wouldn't be able to give you one. I do know I want to be in a head office somewhere. I want to be quite high up, of course, doing business management. As the world's being more into tech, I would kind of try to find something that I could do online, that I could work from home. Marketing is online now, so I could find a job in marketing, and I feel like it would be a good opportunity for me to be flexible with my own life and be able to travel, explore the world through that as well.
Thanks, Vishali. Sounds great. I want to do that too. Catherine?
I get asked this a lot at the moment. Yeah, there's not another degree after the PhD, so I'm going to have to become an actual adult at some point. My two dream jobs, which are very, very big dreams, I would either love to be a documentary presenter and explain archaeology and things, or I'd like to be an MP. I'm quite politically active, but neither are overly realistic. The goal for the end of this year, hopefully post PhD, is essentially to find a job that I enjoy and covers my expenses, pays my rent, helps me support my mother. And yeah, I enjoy policy. I do a lot of diversity work. There's a lot out there that I'm willing to do. I've been teaching undergraduates, and that's been really, really enjoyable. But you know, the marking and the paperwork less so. So yeah, I suppose my main aspiration is to be happy. But I think that's a tall order in today's world.
I absolutely love that, and I think both are very realistic for you, Catherine. So yes, they are both very, very within your reach. Lastly, Elisa, same question to you.
I mean, for me, I've got a real passion for youth work and working with young people. A lot of people might not know, but the youth work industry is actually quite inaccessible if you don't have a degree. So at the minute, it's trying to fill time until that perfect role comes up, and hopefully at some point I'll get the dream role of working with young people and just kind of working in participation and kind of getting more and more young people to talk about their experiences and really giving them a platform where they can thrive and be able to be a young person who they deserve.
Amazing, thanks. It's such a worthwhile cause and goal, and very achievable. I'm certainly sure. Just to close off, if we just end with the pledge, the digital credential that I spoke about at the beginning. So what we've essentially done is worked with the Carers Trust to create kind of 8 bank pledges, which is great to see how they've been. We put these together before the session, but it's great to see how they've been talked about, and I think we've kind of hit the nail on the head, hearing from young carers and hearing from employers today on some of the things that employers can practically do to support young carers into employment. So we've got a couple of them around recruitment, the recruitment process from the very beginning in terms of where you're placing these vacancies, how you're inviting people to apply for opportunities, how people hear about your organisation, practical things, if we're inviting people to interviews, how are we doing that? Can they be done virtually? Can you reimburse interview costs? A couple of ways around young people are actually exposed to work. So rather than it being, you know, a fully fledged contract, work experience, paid always we advocate for, but shorter experiences to give people exposure to what an industry is before committing to a degree or, you know, signing a lengthy contract. And then lastly, just around that championing of role models, creating a safe space so that young people potentially do have care responsibilities, who may have those that you don't even know about within your organisation, feel confident enough to be able to reach out for support and not struggle in silence. So we'll be sending around a link to make a pledge. So we ask you to just commit to doing at least one of these in a little tick box. And then once you've done so, you receive your digital badge, which you can post on social media to carry on the conversation, put in your signature to show that you're advocating for this change, and share with your networks far and wide. I think that is it from us. Just thank you so much, everybody, for joining. We had a couple of questions just around carrying on the conversation, and I think quite a few people would like to be put in touch with the Carers Trust and certain members of staff, so we'll make sure we do that in the follow-up email. And we'll also put together just a short survey just on how you found today. We're all about kind of continuously improving these sessions, so please do let us know what you've enjoyed, what you'd like to see next time. But just a big thank you again to our amazing panelists. Big thank you to Kirsty for chairing that panel, and stay safe all. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you all.